there.
Okay. I guess it didn't start. It gave me, it said something and it went away earlier. So I don't know. But
Okay.
it
Y'all
is
see
now.
that? Do y'all see that?
Yes.
You should see a map on the screen. Okay. So Node-RED is a technology that IBM created. I don't remember if they created or bought. I think it was, yeah, I think because the guy who created Node-RED was working at IBM and sort of kept working with Node-RED. Node-RED is basically a technology to integrate. It was set up to integrate the Internet of Things and different devices, so you could have dashboards, so you could see the status of different things, and you can also change things. You can click on buttons and things like that. This is what you're looking at right here, and I'm going to show you this, and then we're going to show how to go through and get this a working setup and different places you can set it up and how you can do that. What you see here is just a simple one where it's the shack control idea, and this is and WO2X has created this flow, and I'll talk about that. The idea is that this talks to a product called PST Rotator, which is a program that you would run on. You actually run on a Windows box, and it would talk to your rotor controller. You can also, if you want, have Node-RED talk directly to a Yaesu or a High Gain or a Green Heron rotor control box. So the idea is that it allows you to control and see the status of multiple things all in one place. So if you look around your shack, you most likely have a radio, unless it's a really old radio or a classic radio like a Collins or a Drake or something like that. It's going to have a computer interface of some sort. So there also, you may have other devices. You may have watt meters that have either a network connection or a serial connection, and it can be either one. You may have an amplifier that has a serial connection on it. My amplifier, for example, has an Ethernet connection on it. And actually what you're seeing over here is the status of my KPA 1500 right now, which is online in the next room. The Node-RED box is in the same room, but it's just all across the network because this is just a web interface. All you're looking at a web browser here. So this is showing me the status. And the idea is that I can set these flows up. They're called flows, FLOW. I can set these up where I can get sort of a single pane of glass type status of all my things. And that can be anything from really anything with a serial or network interface can be used. And it can be, a lot of the ham radio side of it use of it started with Flex, because Flex has a network connection on it. So if you have a Flex radio, there's actually even more features that you can utilize of Node-RED, because just now people are now starting to get into, well, hey, how do I control my ICOM radio? How do I control my Kenwood radio? So that's happening as well, where people are developing that. So I can see in one place, I can get the status of everything. I can also change things. So for example, if I wanted to click on, again, I don't actually have this with my rotor controller upstairs, so I'm not talking to the rotor controller, but I could potentially click on this beam heading and tell it to automatically turn a rotator. The idea is that anything that has a interface that's controllable is you can have a flow behind it to access that data and display that data in some way. And this is all done, I don't want to say it's done without any programming, but it's done, all this stuff I just installed just to sort of try a base, get it as close to a base install as I could. I imported things from WO2X, who's Dave is a very good resource. I imported these, and all I had to do was tell it the IP address of my KPA 1500, and it took off. And I started talking to the KPA 1500. You see this little green indication. So that's one view, and I want to show you one other graphic here. Let's see, where did, oh, actually here, let me do it this way. Let me show you the graphic this way. Dave had his screenshots. There it is. So this is a screenshot of Dave W2X. Let me move these over here. Had all his different, again, this is sort of the glass cockpit idea of a single pane of glass where, so this is his KPA 1500 status. This is his rotor controller. This is his flex radio. That could just easily be an ICOM radio or a Kenwood radio or a Yaesu radio. This is a host monitor he has. So it tells him, yes, I'm talking to my Raspberry Pi, my switch, my flex, my KPA 1500. He's just doing a ping. This one, he's talking to an Antenna Genius antenna switch. This one, he has a view of the weather on here. You could even do things like, hey, the weather says it's about to, I'm due for some lightning, or I have a warning. Great. If you have one of those little automatic antenna disconnect things, which is questionably how well it works, but the fact of the matter is it exists. You could potentially say, hey, if I get a thunderstorm warning, go ahead and turn everything off and disconnect the antenna. So you can actually react to events, not just display them, but you can have logic that says, hey, if something happens, then take some other action. So it's not just a display. And here you see I have buttons here. So this is I can actually turn the amp on and off. I can change the settings on the antenna switch. There's a flow for an HF auto, for example, the Palstar antenna tuner. I can control that. Anything that has a interface to it, you can control. And the nice thing is you don't have to develop all this stuff from scratch. So what we're going to look at now is the idea of what's out there and some of what this stuff looks like and how you would do it. So, but just conceptually, if you think about all the different things that have interfaces, and again, that could be serial or whatnot, then you can do something with it. I was thinking about this week. The thought just occurred to me. I have always wanted to, let me back up. If you have a UPS in your shack for your computer, many UPSs have a serial connection plugged into them. Well, what if I have multiple things plugged into the UPS? I've always wanted to have some capability that if the UPS said it was about to go down, typically you may have it hooked up to your one computer. And what it'll do is if it tells Windows or your Mac or whatever that, hey, the UPS says it's about to lose battery, I'm going to go ahead and issue a shutdown. Well, that's great if you have only one computer you're worrying about. But what if I have 4 Raspberry Pis plugged into that UPS as well? How do I tell all 5 of those things to go ahead and shut down? So I had a thought that it'd be cool to have Node-RED hooked into the serial port, from the serial port of the UPS over USB into a Raspberry Pi, which is where Node-RED would be running, in my case. Then when it gets it, it would then send a message to all 5 of those things, my 4 Pis and my PC, go ahead and shut down. So in a way to sort of multiplex that type of arrangement rather than just having one. So again, that's, when you have that, you start thinking about all the interfaces and draw lines between things and say, hey, how can I use that data? And then once some event happens that Node-RED detects, and say, hey, UPS is on battery power. Battery has less than 10%. Go ahead and, great, now I've crossed the threshold. I'm going to go ahead and issue commands to the other devices to go ahead and shut down. And I might fire up an SSH session to my Raspberry Pis and issue a shutdown command. I might do something on Windows, which is a little more complicated, but you can still do it on Windows to issue the command to go ahead and shut down. Macs, you can issue an SSH command. That's easy enough. But so again, those are the type of things you can start to look at when you have something along the lines of Node-RED. So the first things first. Where in the world do I get Node-RED? So actually, I'm going to say there's even more a better place to start, and that is if you're not on Groups.io, If you go to groups.io, I highly recommend everybody write this down, or it's called note here. I'll go ahead and put this in the I'll go ahead and put this in the meeting chat for this group. Let's see, where is Zoom's? Hello, Zoom. Where's Zoom? Chat. I'm going to put this in here. I suggest you sign up if you have any interest in Node-RED whatsoever. I suggest you sign up for that Node-RED-Ham radio group. The Node-RED-Ham radio group has all the flows and all the ways you want to different things to use Node-RED is a place you can get that. So I'm going to show you here this is Node-RED. And notice, by the way, I'm just on my browser. So that's all this is I went to my browser, :1880, and that I'm looking at Node-RED. So these are the KPA 1500, the rotor interface, and the host monitor. These are the different pieces that are out there. And those are the things you were seeing over here on this display. That's what all this stuff is. So it's really a graphical type environment where I'm just connecting things together. And if you have any sort of programming background whatsoever, this will be really easy. If you have no programming experience whatsoever, it's really a question of learning. There is a little bit to learn, but how do I connect these things together? And how do I, and it actually gets to be kind of fun. And I'll show you how to make a simple one here, and you'll see this gets a little complex, but you see here where a lot of times people will put things like, hey, please read, here's a comment. And it'll talk about you need to change the IP address of the TCP node. Great, so all I did was I went in here and I put my IP address in and boom, I ran it and it started talking to my KPA 1500. But these are all, so somebody else nicely made all these things. So you don't need to start from scratch. Over here in the Node-RED-Ham radio group is a file section. These are all those flows where you can import them all. So just to take a quick little look here, extra class frequency alarm. Hey, my radio is close to the band edge, and then I want to tell the radio don't transmit. This I think was set up for a flex, yeah. And the GPIO pins. So on a Raspberry Pi, you can actually control the GPIO, those little pins, little IO pins. You can actually use with relays and control those. This is a flow to talk directly to an RT21 Green Heron rotor controller. Just the KPA 1500, KAT 500, KPA 500, step-IR flows. Just this is the lightning protect disconnect switch. I wasn't making that up. Somebody actually did that, but yeah, that's debatable how valuable useful that tool is for lightning. But these are the PALSTAR flows, HF Auto, and there's some other ones: step-IR, satellite tracking, SWR alarms. If you tie it into a W2 watt meter, it can actually detect that. So again, just a wide assortment of things that people have shared to allow you to make use of some of these things. You can get cluster spots, talk to N1MM, lots of, last one here. This is Mac Doppler interfaces, a call book lookup. We were working on an interlock if I wanted to have multiple, just a multi operation, a distributed multi, and how you know, hey, who's transmitting and who's not transmitting. The Power Genius XL flexes new amplifier, flows for that, PST rotor. Yeah, just on, and people just keep adding here. WSJTX to see all the different things on WSJTX. So just lots of stuff. I'll leave it at that. So where do I go how do I start? Node-RED. So the first thing I do is I go to nodered.org. And more. So if node-red.org is a great place to go start and look around and, hey, what's Node-RED? It's got some videos, find out what it is. And sort of browser-based flow editing. Again, all of this is on a browser. I'm not running any other application but a browser. And all these different things I can do. If you do have some programming experience, this is built on a technology called Node.js, which is all JavaScript based. And it can run on different things. It can run on a Raspberry Pi. It can run in Docker, if you know what that is. I actually have a Node-RED instance running on my Synology NAS device that I use in my shack that has my hard drives. It also has what you can put a Docker container in your NAS. This can run on a Windows system. It can run on a Mac. It can run, but I think the easiest thing is to just have a Raspberry Pi. I have a Raspberry Pi 3, I think, running this, but a 4 is probably, if you're doing a lot of stuff, is probably the right thing to do. And I have serial interfaces. You have 4 USBs on a Raspberry Pi. So I have the serial interfaces plugged into the Pi and talking to various things. I also have the Pi in a network. So if it's a network device, it can just talk to the network and not have to, you don't have to worry about the serial interface. But if I want to talk to my 7300 or my 9700, I would connect over the serial. Although the 9700 actually has a server in it that I can talk over Ethernet. I just haven't implemented that yet to have Node-RED talk to the 9700 over the network, but that is on my list of things to do. Let's see. So one of the Node-RED site is a great place to get started and just get some information on, hey, what Node-RED is, learn about the features and different things. And remember, the Node-RED itself wasn't developed specifically for amateur radio stuff, but the idea is that I can do, as it says, low-code programming, event-driven, and that can be controlling things and radios and all the different things you have. By the way, you can also, if you want to use Node-RED for more its original purpose, you can also have it talk to your light switches and your other things. If you want to have Node-RED, that lightning storm you got before, you could say, great, go ahead and tell my Wemo or Alexa to go ahead and turn off my radio, the power switch for my radio or something like that. So you could do things like that too. In the files, actually, I'm sorry, if you go to, again, I highly recommend, if you're going to do this, go to the Node-RED-ham radio group on groups.io. If you go into the wiki down here, installing Node-RED on a 32-bit or a 64-bit Raspberry Pi. If you have a 3B, it's generally going to be a 32-bit. The Raspberry Pi 4 is going to be a 64-bit. So you can check which one that is by looking on the board itself, whether you have a 3B. Usually you can also tell by you'll have full-size HDMIs in your 3. You'll have tiny little micro HDMIs on the Raspberry Pi 4. But get yourself a Raspberry Pi or pull out a Raspberry Pi you have. If you have a Nano or a Zero, that's fine. It'll work on it too. I wouldn't do a lot of stuff on the Zero, but just to get started, it would be fine. But get yourself a little $35 Raspberry Pi. I think that's the easiest way to work on it. Get that set up with the standard things to do with your Raspberry, put Raspberry Pi OS on it. And assuming you have the Raspberry Pi all set up and you're talking to it, you can actually log into it, whether on the you have a monitor and a keyboard plugged into it, or you've SSH'd into it. This talks about doing that down here as well. But the nice thing is this has a complete little section on all these commands you can do to get your Raspberry Pi set up really from nothing. Download and install Raspberry Pi OS. Boot and configure the Pi, talks about that. Talks about running Raspberry config to set up a couple of things, your boot options. Do you want to go into the desktop or the command line interface or the GUI? And then if you had to update it, and then you get down here into you just follow these steps. And I actually just went through these the other day just to sort of test these because I was going to be talking about it. And I went through the process and it all worked just fine. Just do these steps it talks about, and you'll end up with a running installation of Node-RED. And it's actually a pretty nice little wiki. Goes through it very well, and very straightforward. No real deviation from what it did. Your host name down here, where it talks about how do I get to my Node-RED, is going to be whatever your IP address is for your Raspberry Pi. And if you set up your Pi on a network and you don't know what the IP address is, go look in your router. Sometimes you'll be able to find out the address under the DHCP section, what address it got, and you can check that again. But if you're using if you have a console, the GUI, and you have a keyboard and mouse plugged into it and a monitor, then you can just go on the Pi itself and find out what that is, what your IP address is. I rarely ever. I only have one Pi that has a monitor plugged into it, and that's my Pi 400, which has the keyboard built into it. All the rest of the Pis, I never hook a monitor, keyboard, or mouse to it. I always do it remotely through SSH. Let's see. Okay, so one of the things I wanted to show you was what's a simple. There we go. Host monitor. So this is what I downloaded called Host Monitor. And you'll see here where it says, I'm going to click on internet, and that says, who's the target? So the internet is all of the items over here are what are called nodes. And this whole thing together is called a flow. And you'll hear people talk about import this flow. Well, all this code is called a flow. And this is all a set of JSON, just a big file of JSON data. And if I look here, I have ping. I have all these different functions, and I can talk to get HTTP responses. I can have a little web server sitting on my Node-RED device. I can send messages over serial port, serial in, serial out. Play audio. These are all getting into some more parsing. Hey, how do I parse the data I'm getting back? And this different, but these are all the different nodes or things that are built into Node-RED. And we start at the top here. Just so common one. These are all the common ones. Different functions, and the idea is that I have functions that again, he has a little bit of code here. I'm not going to go through the code because it's just not going to make any sense to go through some of this. But again, the nice thing is I just imported this flow. It's pretty straightforward. Programmers are notorious plagiarists. We copy from other people, and that's encouraged. Well, it used to be much more encouraged, and people got funny about licensing. But if you have open source code out there, or you have things that are freely downloadable, there's no problem. I think there's no problem importing it and then learn from that. It's sometimes a lot easier to learn if you look at one that's working, you learn how that works. Hey, why did they do it that way? What was there some alternative? That's a way you can sort of learn how to do something. The purpose of this script, right? By the way, this is the host monitor. Is look at all the different hosts. Like I have this set up to ping my Mac. It'll tell me my UDM Pro, my router is up or down, and it just basically tell me about different. This is actually, I don't have the Flex plugged in, but different things. So anyway, that's just one example of a bigger flow, and these are much more involved. Again, I imported those, and usually what you'll find is whenever you get this, go look around for a comment. You'll see these little comment nodes, and that'll tell you, hey, put your IP address here, or set up your serial port to this. It'll tell you what you need to do. Somewhere around here, I think you'll find change. It says change UDP target. See, I know this is, you see this little call out here. I can tell that's a comment. Change UDP target to IP address of the computer running PST rotator AZ. So change UDP target, and see down. So if I look around all the nodes, I see UDP target. And so this is where I would change this IP address to whatever computer was running in my shack if I had my Windows computer running PSD Rotator. PSD Rotator is a very nice program. If you have a rotator, I know a lot of you guys don't have rotators because you're antenna situations, but one of the other useful things about Node-RED and what sort of drew my interest towards it was to set something up for the remote station at Spark. That way, when you're connected, I can just have it where if you're into the VPN and so you have all, because I don't want to just put this on the internet where somebody could turn the radios on and off. But the control one, so this idea that, hey, if I can change the antenna switch, if you have authorization to do that, then it would be a nice way to allow people to, sorry, let me go back to my dashboard. A nice way to allow people to control the remote station without having to log into a computer through TeamViewer or something like that. And then my other thought was that I could have one flow which was set up to only be available to people who, in other words, it was information only or inquiry only. That's what I'm looking for. And then that one I could put on the internet, where anybody could go to the internet and see the status of the station and who's connected to it and what it was doing, but they couldn't actually affect any change. So that was one idea and one of the things you could do. So any questions so far?
No, that's pretty cool stuff. I might have to set up a Node-RED set up on a Raspberry Pi.
Yeah, I certainly encourage that. And again, if you have a Synology or if that makes any sense, where you have a Docker container, you can do it that way. It will run on Windows. You even have things where if anybody has ever seen, shoot, I don't have one in here. I think it's in the Ham Shack. If anyone's ever seen one of the little Elgato, what do they call those? The Stream Decks, where it has the little buttons on it. And you can actually have it. There's things where you can control your flex radio. If you operate flex equipment, you always have to have. I mean, this is really, this is one of those things where it should almost come with it. There's so many interesting things that have developed up around flex, and this idea of there's a thing called FR Stack, which is made that you can basically, it creates a RESTful interface where you just call different URLs on a web browser and do things. And the nice thing is that lends itself really cool to like the Stream Deck, little device where you can just push a button and change bands, and works really well again for remote. So maybe you don't want to operate, maybe you want to have a sort of a hybrid of using the computer and also have a keyboard, but you don't have a Maestro. And you want to sort of operate it that way. So it's, again, just because it came up around the Flex, it was, so that was the first iteration for it. And then fortunately, as people started working on the ICOM interfaces, they're actually, I will add one thing because this may be relevant to some people, is the work I've seen people starting to do for ICOM has actually been not necessarily talking directly to the ICOM radio over the serial interface, but they've been using, what is the, well, I can't remember, there's a little rig control application. Jason, your SDR uses that. I just can't remember the name of it. It was drawing a blank.
Like HDR Uno or something, or?
No, it's the code that talks to the
Oh, OmniRig.
OmniRig. Thank you very much. Yeah, OmniRig, and there's one more, HamLib and OmniRig. Yeah, I think they actually did it with HamLib. The cool thing is once you talk to HamLib, you can then, if Node-RED's talking to HamLib, you can control any radio that HamLib can control. So you could have it control your SDR with OmniRig as well, for example. So if you wanted to do that and see where it was, now it'd be a little harder to do things like put the spectrum data on the screen. That might be a little much for a web browser, but so it's interesting to me because my radio is, my KPA 1500 is sitting there. Obviously this is not changing status. It's not changing its temperature. This is a programming artifact where it's in its polling cycle. It's kind of bouncing around. It's not changing. I assume it's not in there changing temperatures and going on and off. But this is just how he's got the flow set up. I have to look at that and see why he keeps going back to 0. I think but anyway, I'd look into that. But let me show you just one real quick thing I'm going to go create a new. So here I'm in Node-RED. So let me start from the scratch here. So here, I've gone to my browser and it loads Node-RED. Great. Internet. Which one is this? Oh, this is Dave's internet. Oh, there it is. Okay. Oh, I see. Okay. I'm going to go create and this is an simple example. And you always go through the, hey, how do I do a hello world? But I just want to show you, this is really what I'm doing. When we talk about the drag and drop sort of thing, it's like I'm dragging this, then I'm dragging this over, and then I'm clicking right here, and I'm just making a line, and that's going to flow. So information is going to flow from here to here, and it's going to, and I can actually have a debug, and I think if this is the timestamp, it's going to do this after. It's going to do this after 1 second and repeat interval every 1 second. And I'm gonna deploy this flow. Oh, it doesn't like that. Okay, I got some other issue. And then if I go look at my debug, you see how I'm looking at debug right now? You see what's happening? I'm getting the timestamp injected into this every 1 second. So I'm actually looking at a little simple, so granted, you just did a little program just by doing this timestamp, because I've told this one, hey, send your message, fire off every 1 second and send your message. And this is just a debug, and it's displaying anything in the message payload. Because it's going to take the timestamp and put it into message payload, and then it's going to display that, and then it's going to move it, and then it's going to put it into debug. So again, basic rudimentary thing. It's not very useful, but gives you an idea how how easy it is to put a couple nodes together and just click them. And if I wanted to do this as well, I could go ahead and say, hey, great, send this over here. Maybe I want to do something else. And just all these different, you can have switches. Okay, do this if it's 1, do this if it's 2, do this if it's 3, and whatnot. But anyway, my purpose here was not to go into, hey, how do I program Node-RED flows necessarily, but I did want to make sure that I showed what Node-RED is. And most importantly, I wanted to make sure, let me go ahead and stop this. No need to have this anymore. Let's sit here and using resources while you're doing it. All right, so I did want to make sure that we showed this, because I cannot stress enough that the going to Node-RED, going to this site is the on Groups UI, getting the wiki and going through these steps will get you up and running pretty quickly on how to use Node-RED. And one more thing on the wiki is, if you do have for Flex radio users, so Ron, for example, I know you have a Flex. You want to make sure you go through this step and set up FR Stack on the Pi as well, because FR Stack is a very useful tool on the Pi. You see here, then you can go and do things like auto disconnect and radios and control the slices and all these different things on, and all with browser commands. That's basically what it's doing. And then Node-RED, there's Node-RED flows to make use of that. But anyway, that's a good place to start. So go here. And the other cool thing is, if you look at the messages, and the first message is a getting started with Node-RED. So look at the first messages, and I kid you not, Dave's retired. The number of times I've seen on this message board where Dave has said, "Hey, if you're having problems, give me your information. We can team viewer and I'll help and connect." And the guy gets on there and just helps people and works with people to fix stuff, and just an amazingly helpful group of people trying to help other people at Node-RED. And I'd be glad to help people as well with it. So, and I mean, Dave knows far more about Node-RED than I do. I sort of come at it from a programming standpoint. Dave's not a programmer, so he does it a little different. He's more a robotic guy, so or a process automation guy, older process automation guy. So he does it from a slightly different take on it. So it's funny. I look at it more from a programming step, and it's like, oh, yeah, it's this. It's like it's pretty standard stuff, but it's actually kind of fun to develop Node-RED. Just sort of grab the flows together and you don't have to do as much code for the facilitation. It's more just I'm going to concentrate on the individual function. So it's kind of a cool little thing to play with. What else do we have here? I think that's it. But I can't say enough how here's an example I just saw the other day. Somebody said, "Hey, I did a search on how to change something." I think he was looking for a little flow or an icon to change Celsius to Fahrenheit. And I hadn't gotten a chance to answer this. And I'm just thinking, just make a function. It's just a simple mathematical formula. So, but again, that's how I do it, where I think somebody was also looking for, hey, I just want a little function where I put Celsius in and I get Fahrenheit out. It's like, just write the code. It's like, but that's, I have a slightly different take on it because of my background.
Yeah, for a code writer, that's easy.
Yeah, exactly. It's trivial. So I mean, it's like I almost to the point I don't understand the question.
So, but, you gotta remember to dumb it down for us, Tom.
So no, I mean, so here, great example. Here's a function, and the function does return message, and I would basically inject the function I would change and call here's the name. I would say C to F. And I would basically say, great, inject, I have some code in the function which said, take the input and what is it, let's see, C to F is 5. C to F is going to be 5/9 plus, or 5/9 minus 32. I always forget, but yeah, whatever it ends up being, and you'd have the code, and then great, that would be your Celsius to Fahrenheit function. Or no, the other way around. It's going to be 9/5 plus 32. And but anyway, that's the idea. So it's just you can have these little functions, and great. Once you write that function, you can use that. You can copy it from node to node or flow to flow, and do it that way. So it's just a pretty straightforward little thing. But you can put all those together. But anyway, certainly. So go here and get yourself set up on your Raspberry Pi. If you do not have a Raspberry Pi or need any information, this wiki's pretty good on it, but if you get stuck on, hey, I don't know how to write this, he talks about, he'll say things like run the Raspberry Pi imager. He's got download the Raspberry Pi imager. Oh, this is from Raspberry Pi OS. Yeah, this is from Raspberry Pi org. So Raspberry Pi walks you through how do I get the imager. You can download, pick Mac because I'm on a Mac. It'll actually tell you how to write. So if you go here for Windows, it'll get the imager. It'll actually download it and get you so you can put a little card. You get a little SD writer on your computer. So if you have a computer that has a little SD card reader or writer in it, that's what you need to program your card. And you get a little mini SD card, and that's gonna go in the computer, and you'll basically go ahead and create an operating system and a card to put into your Raspberry Pi. If anybody wants to do this and has trouble with that step on setting up a Raspberry Pi, let me know. I'd be glad to, if we have a few people, we can set up a Zoom thing. I'd be glad to do it, work with you in any way because Raspberry Pi is a cool little device, and we've talked about it various times over the meeting over the years, but when we get together, that's one of the things I'd like to do, have a little workshop on setting up a Raspberry Pi, but unfortunately we haven't been able to do that. Let's see. I think that's, unless anybody has any other questions. Yeah,
Where do
by
you
all,
get,
go ahead, Sam.
where do you get a Raspberry Pi?
Oh, where do you get a Raspberry Pi? That's a great question. So what you can do is you can go to, where do I get them? If you go to the, well, here, if you go back, go to raspberrypi.org. Raspberry Pi is the official place. So if you want to buy a Raspberry Pi, you go in here and it'll tell you where you can buy it. And it'll show you the various resellers in the US. I go to Pi Shop. I used to go to Newark, but I go to pieshop.us. And Pi Shop, you can go buy a Raspberry Pi. And the 4, you can buy 2 gig is probably fine for this. If you have one and you don't have anything else on, I'd probably go ahead and get the 4 gig, but the 2 gig would be fine too. But this is where you get your Raspberry Pi. You need that, and you also need, don't forget, you need a little power supply. So you might want to get one of the packages that has somewhere in here, I think they have the sort of the packet, a little case for it, the 3-amp power supply, and the Raspberry Pi itself. So, but that's Pi Shop, pieshop.us. I think, yeah, pieshop.us. If you want to pick somewhere else, go to Raspberry, what I did here, go to raspberrypi.org and or go to raspberrypi.org and then tell it buy, and you can go pick whichever one of these places you'd like to buy from.
And I bought them successfully from Amazon too, right? You can buy the can of kits, one of the official vendors there, right? And they put together packages, as Tom mentioned. You can buy them on Amazon, have it there next day or whatever too. So
the nice thing about CanaKit is the CanaKit packages. So here's the complete starter kit. I'm not sure what the difference between these two is, but the nice thing about CanaKit is this power supply is very quiet. I have actually bought a bunch of CanaKit power supplies just I wanted to get rid of the noise, but these CanaKit, they're very well filtered, so you're not going to inject a lot of switching noise. So this is an example. They have a little case for it, and I don't know what the difference in these are, but they have a case. They have a little fan that goes on it, and a little heat sink, and the SanDisk. But I would do something like that, especially if you don't have a. I think I probably bought it first, that and a power supply. But the CanaKit's a really good one too. And Amazon definitely has that. And it helps the club if you buy it with Amazon Smile. So plug.
Yep.
Yeah, so if you just look on definitely if you're gonna buy one, buy a 4. There's really no reason to buy the other one. And by the way, I don't know, I mean, you could certainly do it on the 400. This is the Raspberry Pi 400. That's actually, we'll check this out here. This is a Raspberry Pi 4. Let's see if it shows up. That's not going to show up.
Oh, you have one.
This is a Raspberry Pi 400. Yeah, I just shut it down abruptly. It didn't like that. So you see on the back, it has these. It's not. Oh, that's not focusing. I got to set up the focus setting.
Ports.
It's got the ports right in the back of it. So, and it's got the Wi-Fi. So I just have it hooked up on Wi-Fi, and it's got even has GPIO pins on the back here that come out the back. So
that's awesome. I was thinking about putting one of those units like in the guest bedroom, so when people came, they had internet access if they wanted without having to.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, that'd be perfect. I mean, you need to have it wired to the TV, of course, but yeah, I just have it on a monitor over on the corner of my desk with it. And I have a little USB mouse thing plugged into it. But yeah, so that's a Pi 400. I don't think I would necessarily. I mean, if you have one, you could, but I don't think I necessarily do that because again, you're going to have a bunch of USB port or a bunch of serial, USB dongles or USB to serial cables plugged out, hanging out of the back of it. So, and this one has only 2 USBs in the back, whereas the other one has 4. So I think for that, just for Node, something like Node Red, I would get a. I must literally have 12 Raspberry Pis around here, and I think I have a few more coming because I needed some more 4s. But I just use them for the PiAware, and I just use them for all kinds of things. So and I just leave them running. All my Pi holes. Everything's just a little, because I have 2 Pi holes in the house for redundancy, but for DNS resolution. But anyway, so yeah, if you need help with any of that, please don't hesitate to ask. I think we even have a place in the forum for building, and it specifically mentions Raspberry Pi. So use the forum, and we'll help you out any way we need to get you set up on using a Pi. I think Pis are just outstanding little devices. So really fun way to introduce people to another brand of computing. One other thing I wanted to show here was just to give you an example. Let's see. Oh, wrong one, sorry. Here's one. So this is the Pi at Spark. I think that we lost power a while back, and so you'll see here that it says it's been up for 107 days. Before we lost power, it was up for 450 some odd days. These things just don't go down. They're incredibly reliable. Linux is an incredibly stable operating system, and they just run, and it's not something you worry about. I have a script set up to update it once a week, and it goes out and gets any updates it needs, and they just run. They're just incredibly reliable. It's not one more computer you're going to have to struggle over. Pi's just run, and that applies to most Linux computers. But this does all our remote access and whatnot into Spark. So I need to get into the Spark network. I actually use this as a firewall or as a VPN. And so this little Raspberry Pi does all this stuff for me. So it's they're really quite impressive little boxes. I can't speak highly enough of them.
Tom, you need to up your uptime. We recently discovered a Cisco switch at work in Kansas City that had been running for 7 years without a reboot.
Wow, that's pretty impressive. That's also a little scary for a Cisco switch.
Yeah.
Well, I guess unless they don't need updates they don't need to reboot for updates. But
well, sad state that the iOS hadn't been updated in a long time.
That would mean it hadn't had a security update in 7 years.
Yeah.
So, although in truth be told, the Pi doesn't need to reboot after you do the update. So Linux is pretty good about that. iOS might be as well. Not iOS. Yeah, it is iOS.
Yeah, it is iOS.
I can say that was confusing for a second, but it was iOS first. So any other questions? Okay, so go by all means, go out to Node-RED, go out to Groups.io with that link I sent. Look at this wiki page and get started. Get yourself a Raspberry Pi. Have fun. You have any troubles? Post a message on the forum or email me, ny4i@ny4i.com, and we'd be glad to help you. But put something on the forum, that way everybody can get the benefit of your question and also the answer.
Well, cool. Thank you very much, Tom.
Thank you, Tom.
Very informative. I see how long it takes Glenn to get Node-RED running his flight simulator.
Hey, that's the single pane of glass idea. That's actually if you think about it, that's I sort of use that expression for what Node-RED is, but that's kind of where that comes from. It is sort of the glass cockpit type idea to integrate all those different systems, so you don't have to look at all the little individual gauges. It puts it all in one place.
So Glenn, you've got to figure out, so when you have a wanted park, how to have Node-RED monitor spots, and when a certain park that you want is active, have it inject a message into your flight management system on your flight simulator, so you realize you need to land or go on autopilot so you can get the POTA spot that you need.
You just need to pause and spin around to the other side of the room.
Exactly.
Jack, does somebody sleep in that bed?
Huh?
Never mind. I'll talk to you later.
No, this is the office / guest room / bed kind of becomes.
My shack used to have a bed in it. I remember that in Palm Harbor. Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, it's kind of got the wide camera angle. So it's
Gotcha.
a catch all, like, oh, don't have time to put something away. I was sticking on that bed. So,
All right, thank you.
well, everybody,
Nice presentation.
yeah, thank you very much. We appreciate you attending today. Our next meeting is going to be on May 1st. If you need any email addresses, they're right here. There's some of our social media things over here. I will say that Twitter and YouTube are kind of new and aren't terribly active at the moment, but if you're not on the Slack channel that Tom had originally set up, I would definitely join the Slack channel, because there are some of us always on there talking about, something, or it's a really easy way to get people's attention if you want to ask something real quick. It's definitely faster than email or the forum, and has become popular. So check them out, and otherwise we'll see y'all next month.
Very good.
Presentation.
I just put a link in the chat. I put a link to the Slack channel. If you want to join over there, it's an application you can run on your PC, your Mac, or phone, and see quick content over there as well. It's not a replacement for the forum or things like that. It's just a way to get a little more. It's rather than emailing individual people, you can sort of more communal. We use it for chatting with each other from time to time. So click that link and you can it'll set you up on Slack.
Thanks, Jack and Tom.
All righty. Well, everybody have a good weekend, and we'll talk to you later.
Enjoyed it. Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.
See y'all. Bye-bye.
Okay.